I don't think I remember. Yes, I suppose I remember. That was because in France it was not performed at all at this moment, at this time when I was young. First during the war, of course, but I mean even after the war, there was a very big gap between the Austrian musical culture and the French musical culture. Therefore, I think the first time I have heard Mahler, that was in France anyway. But I mean, it was the Fourth Symphony, and I remember the Schellen at the beginning, because it was so unusual to hear this kind of noise to begin a symphony, especially, that it was surprising. I think I began to know better Mahler when I was in Germany, when I was in Baden-Baden. And I remember we discussed it with Hans Rosbaud. And Hans Rosbaud told me, you must listen to this symphony. And it was the Ninth Symphony. He has recorded himself. And I was really very much impressed. And then I began to have an opinion on Mahler that I could not have before because of the lack of knowledge. And the success of Mahler began really not with Bruno Walter. Bruno Walter played certainly regularly Mahler in America, but I mean also Mitropoulos played regularly Mahler, but the big success was Bernstein, certainly. And Bernstein made Mahler popular in the States. It was his kind of responsibility, let's say, to make Mahler popular. But I mean, there were precedents. And especially Mitropoulos was very courageous, but I was told, for instance, by musicians whom I knew in the orchestra, that when Mahler 7th, for instance, or 5th or 6th was performed in the 50s, the hall was emptying itself progressively because it was considered as too long and boring, simply that. No, we did not have a very close contact with Bernstein. I saw him, of course, from time to time, but I mean, we did not discuss music because our tastes were so far from each other that the discussion would have not gone anywhere else. I mean, and I think there was a kind of agreement with don't touch this type of subject. The number of times he writes "don't drag" or "don't rush," so that's always negative. Nicht eilen, nicht schleppen, and he was afraid that you precisely under the weight of the emotion, you just exaggerate what he wanted. In Mahler, you have really a movement which is 30 minutes long, or even more. And then, you have to organize that, certainly. You cannot just go along and say, well, I have this emotion at this moment, I am waiting for the second one, and just play from time to time with holes in the middle. Well, I think you cannot condemn anybody to make that more or less. Also, because if that's the way they feel the music is well transformed or deformed as you want. But that's their way of expressing themselves through the music. I find that, if you look for authenticity, that certainly if you go against the indications of Mahler, and if you make something sentimental where he writes not sentimental, then that's a kind of treason, certainly. But what is not treason? The more, the furthest the music are from us, then the less authentic you can be. Well, quite a lot. First the distance, the long distance, let's say. Because how to organize, long work. like I did recently, for instance, with Surinsis, 45 minutes of music without stopping. And you have to organize your concept of time very differently, because you have to make the ideas renewing themselves and in the same time being recognizable. The weight of the instrument is very well calculated in Mahler, and also the proportion of the dynamic proportion are very important there, because when he writes a fortissimo for some instrument and pianissimo for another instrument, he knows absolutely the weight of the instruments, of the register, of the color. The first one I conducted, that was the Fifth Symphony, because it was very little performed at this time, 65 or 66, I don't remember. And then, with BBC, it was my way to try how I could do it. And I don't remember exactly the performance. I don't think it was really the peak of the performance I have ever done, because that was the first time, simply that. No, I was interested in Mahler, and then what you said is exactly what I thought myself, that I considered, I have heard, especially from Adorno, that Mahler was, the source of the Second Viennese School. And then I began also to think back, Schoenberg, Weber, and Berg, and to go back to Mahler. And I could understand better DEUTSCH when I knew Mahler, and especially the military march and so on, and all the vulgarity, well conceived, the kind of vulgarity which you find in DEUTSCH with the characters of the Hauptmann and the character of the Tambour Major. Then something I discovered with Mahler retrospectively, and I say, yes, I see from where it comes. Well, if you look at the 10th Symphony, especially also the Adagio or even the 9th, certainly he would have pushed in a kind of direction of where the expanded tonality. I don't think he would have given up the grammar of the tonality. The classified chords and so on. But he would have pushed the relationship between the chords very far. There are two aspects of Mahler which are very different. You have the symphonic aspect, when the mass is important. Very, very often, if you see the first movement of the Sixth Symphony or on the last movement, the massive aspect is really important. And if you see the Wunderhorn, on the contrary, with very little, he does marvel, because he can make miniatures as well as a big painting. Well, sometimes when I have enough of the bombastic Mahler, I am delighted by the refined Mahler, I must say. Because sometimes, the E-flat major is grandioso, but sometimes that's a grandioso which is in the past. I suppose there is something true in it, yes. Yes, because myself, I want to go to push, because I am afraid that I will be boring all the time. And then I push the tempo, and then I calm down progressively when I master the thing. And for me, the relationship between the various tempos, tempi, for me, that's very important. Especially when you have to find a kind of coherence between the tempi, like in the second movement of the 8th.